All right, welcome everyone. We are here for Cities Digital sales training on Laserfiche QuickFields and its associated products. What we're looking at here is a little training guide that is available in the Cities Digital CD-admin Laserfiche repository under our training guides area in the consulting department. But I wanted to introduce you to QuickFields and its architecture to start off with. And if you've never seen QuickFields before, QuickFields is a product that is used to scan, identify, separate, apply information as it is obtaining that information from a scanned image and applying it to a template or field, and then can store that document into the Laserfiche repository. In other words, quick fields. Usually the intent is to capture data off of a document, put it onto a template, or just apply those fields, and then get it into Laserfiche. And that used to be fine with QuickFields 9 and previous. It was just QuickFields. You would create a session, run the sessions from the QuickFields software, and this is all done either manually or on a schedule, assuming that everything would be processed successfully. That schedule would just run. The document could then, or documents, could be stored in Laserfiche, and you're all done. Well, in version 10, they have gone to a slightly different architecture in which they have a QuickFields server, which now can store the sessions for you, and you can then run a session. And when I say session, a QuickFields session just is a definition of all the processing steps that might be required to process certain types of documents. So those sessions can be created to run through a single document type or multiple document types. But regardless of what kind of session you've designed, you can now store that session on the, quote, QuickFields server. That's new in version 10, which now means you can also run a QuickFields session through a software that they call QuickFields Scanning, which is kind of a stripped down, just scanning only module that can be distributed to a workstation and to a user so that they don't have to worry about configuring it all using the QuickFields software itself and getting into all the session settings. All they need to do is launch scanning, QuickFields Scanning that is, select the session that they want to run against the documents, and they are off to the races. So we'll go cover all three of those modules here in our training, but I wanted to introduce the concepts here of that architecture today. And we can see here in our little demonstration here, we've got QuickFields and its architecture. This is the QuickFields Scanning Guide, and I'm going to scroll down to another page real quick, because once you've set it up, you jump into the scanning module, and you are brought to a scanning screen. And let's take a look here at that scanning screen, and it's broken out. And once you hit scan up in the top right corner, top left corner, just like you might have run in the old days, you can tell it to scan. It can pull documents from various sources, just like in the regular QuickFields. But once you've done that, you are shown each document, and you can see the document list on the left-hand side. You can then take a look at the individual pages on that document, and then you can see on the right-hand side the metadata for each one of those documents, how it has been applied. And if you like what you see, you can't really see it, scanning ribbon and toolbar definition is up here, but right here you can actually, at that point, if you like everything and all the documents look good, they all have the right metadata, you can hit the Send All Documents button to store them in Laserfiche or individually send them into Laserfiche. So pretty basic and straightforward application of as far as that goes. It is licensed. This product, the Laserfiche QuickField Scanning module, is just like the Laserfiche QuickFields module. You can install one or the other on a workstation because it is licensed per workstation. You can install one or the other, but it does take up a QuickFields license. So you can actually install, I think, both QuickFields and QuickField Scanning on one machine because they both use the same license. So you're okay with that. QuickField Server comes with QuickFields 10, so it's not like you have to get that licensed because you can run the server, but it's really dependent upon how many licenses you've purchased for QuickFields. And as we know, QuickFields is licensed per station, and along with its associated sub-modules, classification, annotation, all those different modules that you might want to add on, those would be added to each site or station license. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
The next step is to actually look at how we create a QuickFields session and the power of QuickFields and all the different sub-modules. Am I going to get into which modules are available in which package? No. I honestly don't know the answer to those here, but those are listed in your sales material typically, and is listed in Laserfiche's sales material so that you'll understand what each module does, even though it might be packaged in a pack, so to speak. We can take a look at what the capabilities are within QuickFields. Okay, so we've switched over to a virtual machine, and we're going to take a look at QuickFields. Just to get familiar with QuickFields, QuickFields can do processing of documents from various sources. So let's go ahead and launch QuickFields and take a look at what we can do. So QuickFields has the ability to look at recent sessions, or you can create new sessions. And QuickFields can be told, hey, I'm going to use a scanner to pull documents in and process, or you can even use QuickFields to look into Laserfiche using what they call the capture engine, and go into Laserfiche, pull the documents out, process them, and then send them back into the repository. You can also tell QuickFields to pull from a network folder on either your desktop or a network file location. Mm-hmm. But in either case, when QuickFields pulls that in, it's going to do something. It's going to have to process the documents, whether it's a simple matter of just doing OCR, or it's going to be identifying different document types from the stack of pages that are in that document. It varies on what you can do, and we'll go through each of the ways we can do that. So QuickFields is really powerful. It can be confusing, but don't let that stop you from learning here. It's going to be pretty straightforward, and I'm going to step through each one of those steps. I do not have a desktop scanner on my machine here, so my tests are going to involve scanning from a document that already exists in Laserfiche. But if you've already created a session, great, you might see it listed here. If you don't have a new session, we can go through the session wizard, and I think that's probably best initially to show you what the questions are, and then we'll go and see how they match up to what the session is actually going to do. So let's go through the session wizard. And the beauty of Laserfiche QuickFields is it has this wizard, so even end users who have just been introduced to Laserfiche can get started pretty quickly. And you have a choice of the type of wizard. We do, for first-time users, do recommend using the full wizard, which steps through all kinds of things. So the first question it comes up with is, what do you want to name this session? Now, this session could be anything. It could be my quarterly reports because you scan statements and you want to run them through a session so that you identify each client's report and break them out from that whole stack of quarterly reports that you got from your vendor of choice, whether it's, TD Ameritrade or Schwab or whoever sent you this stack of documents, you can process them. Doesn't matter what the name is, but we'll go through the wizard here and it might make sense. The next step is, what's your source for capturing the images? Now, I mentioned that we could get documents from a network share or off your desktop. That would be Universal Capture. Scan Connect, Twain, and WIA, those are all scanning connections to a physical scanner. Just a different type of connection, but they're all really physically connecting to a scanner. And then finally, Laserfiche Capture Engine, which is going into Laserfiche, pulling them from within the Laserfiche repository for processing. In this case, I might want to do this capture from an engine. So from Laserfiche, I'll use the capture engine there. And then our source settings are going to be fairly similar regardless of what kind of scan device we use. But we want to click this button and say, OK, at least for, well, they're going to vary depending on the previous choice, right? So this one is going to be a connection to a server in order to pull the documents out of the Laserfiche repository. So we need to know, okay, which repository are we going to pull from? How are we logging into that repository? Because you can use, just like the client, you can use Windows or Laserfiche password authentication. I'm going to use the account that I have here. You can require additional logins after opening the session, or you can even use SSL encryption. At this point, we'll click Apply, and that should be good to go. So that's our connection setting. And then we can step through some of the other steps in this retrieval. Retrieving from Laserfiche gives us options to do a search and use that search to get the documents we want. Or you can say, hey, I want to pull it from a particular folder, and they're always in this incoming scans folder and maybe under this folder. And I want to pull from subfolders or not. I can search and pull by name using tokens or dates or what have you, or type of document. I can then say, hey, I want to do documents but not shortcuts. I don't want to pull PDFs, but maybe I do want to pull by field, etc. So there are a number of different ways to search and get those documents to be retrieved. If you've got that set up, you can then go to the content, and you can define what is going to be pulled in. If you pull in a document for each page, do you want to retrieve the image, and do you want to keep the orientation the same? Do you want to retrieve the text that's on that document? Because, as you know, you could bring a document into Laserfiche and have searchable text generated. And you might be using that in your quick field session, or you might need to maintain it and push it on when you push it back into Laserfiche. So you have that option. You can even bring in annotations. Typically, it's just image, but good to know that we have this. If you're bringing in PDFs, and yes, Laserfiche quick fields can pull in PDFs and convert them basically like the client does, can convert them to TIFF images. And if you're going to convert them to or generate image pages from that PDF, do you want to keep them as color or downgrade them to black and white? And also, do you want to maintain a DPI, or do you want to set the DPI or dots per inch setting lower? It's up to you here. So a bit of flexibility in that regard. And much like the client, if you don't want to keep the PDF and just send the image pages back in that document, then uncheck the box and it will remove the PDF file from that document. And some options, if we're pulling from Laserfiche, it might assume that it has Laserfiche pages, and if it's a PDF, but if so, do you want to overwrite them? So we've got a few options here. If anything does not make sense, always hit the help button, which will show you the online help. And it even has contextually brought us to an area which is reflecting the same content we were looking at in that dialog box. All right, so if you've got everything set in that regard, great. If you want to go to post-processing, here's where you can tell QuickFields what to do after you've scanned a document. This allows us to set all kinds of actions. You can add multiple actions. As you can see here, we just need to add an action to, maybe we want to assign some fields to a document, and then if we want, we can maybe even move the document to a different path. We can use previously used locations. We can even use tokens to put in a default folder. So this would go to a folder called ZZ Prior Docs, and then the date at which those documents were created, so today's date. in this path, you can just browse for it as well. So that's our action, and then if you wanted to do other things, you could remove it later on. You can add another action, etc. Add tags, assign field values, assign templates from your big list of templates. These are all my test templates, so forgive me. But you can do all kinds of settings here. If you don't set the settings, you'll notice this little red exclamation. That tells you, hey, you didn't set some setting. Same as in workflow. You'll see that pretty common. When you're running quick fields, maybe you want to test this session. You might want to set some limits as you're testing and say, oh, I don't want to process more than one document at a time, and the number of pages in that document. Let's say I'm processing a document that I know is 100 pages. Maybe I only want to grab one page because I know I'm going to process just one for testing. You could do this. Normally, you might limit not the number of pages, but the number of documents to be retrieved in each session because, as I alluded to earlier, you might be using this QuickField session in QuickField's agent, which is the automation tool that allows you to run QuickField sessions on a schedule. And you might not want to choke the server with too many documents, so you might want to limit that session to processing only a certain number of documents per run, so to speak. And you can do that here. With all that set, let's see, no, let's go ahead and say OK. Oh, I didn't set a post-processing setting. Let me delete that because it's going to bark at me. Okay, now that you set your scan source, right, how do you retrieve the documents and what are you doing as soon as they've been processed? Let's go on to the next step, which is to, at least in this case, we said we're going to process documents from Laserfiche and then send them back into Laserfiche. It looks like we're being asked for the same information twice. Well, the first one was to get the documents. This one is to send the documents. So you just get a same thing, enter your password, no big deal, and we're good. You do want to validate that it's all good, probably because I'm logged in to Laserfiche twice, and I make sure I type that correctly as well. And there you go. You're all good to go. So now it's going to store it. So now we're going to get a question as to what are we processing here in this session? Well, it might be invoices, and we could call it that. They might be statements, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call this invoices. This is my document class. And how are we going to identify the beginning of the next document? So they might have a cover sheet, or really the first page, which is readily identifiable. It says invoice on there somewhere right at the top of the page. It might have some additional information on a second page, but then it might have a third page, it might have a second page, it might have a fourth page. Every time we process a document, the length of that document may vary, but we know the first page has some value that's unique to that first page. And that's what we want to say here. When the first page identification conditions are satisfied, that's when a new document is created. We can use that mode, or sometimes in a document, the pages might be variable, but the last page has something so unique that we know that's going to identify the end of the document, and therefore the next page is the beginning of the next same document type. So if that makes sense, we can toggle and use one or the other. Most often we find that it's the first page identifier. Sometimes you get lucky and all the documents you're processing are the same page length. If that's the case, you can say, hey, they're all 3 pages long, whatever. Maybe not in this case, but we'll go ahead and say next. And now we get a really neat portion of the product. We can actually insert a sample image. If we have a scanner or we've got a document's first page, we can actually use that. In fact, Laserfiche gives us a sample page here to kind of play with as far as we define that QuickField session. But it's going to be something that you've scanned or you have access to within the repository, and you can put it in here and say, this is my first page. This is what I'm going to use as my identifying page, and help us use it for laying out the session. I'm not going to do that, add a new one here, but as you can see, you can import from a exported TIFF image somewhere, on your machine, and bring that in. As long as the DPI of this sample image is going to match your normal scanning, you're all good to go. So we'll use that. But next, okay, next question in the wizard is, do you want to apply a template and put it into a particular volume? I'm going to put it in default volume. Do I want to apply a template to this document? Maybe it's client files, but if it's an invoice, it probably goes into my invoices template. Not a big thing. Most users will already have that template. If not, you get to go into the admin console and create the template and fields. All right. Next step is to name the document. Obviously, we're going to use Quick Fields to put documents in the repository, but we want to name them. Calling them untitled is probably not the best thing. At minimum, we want to give it maybe a token like today's date and time, which is unique enough to say it's untitled, but with a unique date and time stamp so that we don't get untitled and then untitled 1, untitled 2, untitled 3, etc. Additionally, we can say, hey, this goes into my new folder, and maybe you want to set it for today's day, so we can use tokens again. Or if we're pulling documents off of or information off of the fields, from that template, hey, we can even say, what, let's put it in vendor name. So it'll go into a new folder by vendor name based on the field information pulled from the session. I'll show you how that works. It might not make sense, but this is, how you can set it. Finally, you do have some additional settings. You can run a Quick Field session manually, but then they get stored on a schedule even without having to use Quick Field's agent. As we know, Quick Field's agent can be a bit pricey and makes sense when you have lots of sessions and lots of automation that you need. But if you are running a session during the day, but then you want to make sure that the storage of those documents does not occur until later in the evening, that's what this Send Documents dialog is going to set. You can even tell it how to handle unidentified documents, because guess what? Quick Fields might be scanning documents and looking at them, but the document quality might not be good enough to identify the document, and it might have problems, and therefore we need to handle those. So we can even configure what to do when we see unidentified documents. And that might mean, hey, we're going to send it into a particular folder in Laserfiche that's set up just to handle unidentified documents, and then we have to manually go and reprocess them. All right, so there you go. The wizard is done. It confirms all the settings you might have set there, and then we click Finish, which brings us to the actual Quick Fields main software. And this is what our end users will do when they create a session. They'll be either looking at an existing session, or they'll have created one and they come and look at this interface as we see here. All right, any questions on the wizard?
Yep.
No questions on the wizard? Okay, great.
Straightforward.
All right, so what we end up with is our new session. I called it new session, but I called the document type invoices. You can see that right here. So as I can click on the configuration module in the top left corner, I can even see all those settings that I set for my scan source. It's going to come from Laserfiche's folder called Quick Fields Processed. I can even come up here at the top and say I want to pull just PDFs, and even set it to pull, with a particular template applied. So that'll prevent this session from pulling documents that might be in that folder but are maybe all kinds of documents. So not a big deal. All right, so we can set those settings or not. I'm going to leave it blank because I just want to pull everything that's in there. Pre-classification processing is a really neat feature. It allows you to tell the system to look at every single page and look for something on that page, because Quick Fields looks at all the pages and then breaks them out. So I can add a couple different processes, and as we can see here on the right-hand side, I can do things before I even try and process the document. I can add lots of image refinement options here, and those are for the most part, available in the basic product. You can usually do color removal, color smoothing, despeckle, inversion, line removal, both vertical and horizontal, as well as some smoothing, which kind of makes things easier to read. Usually these image refinements are available to all, from basic quick fields with no modules to any of the other modules. The forms processing, that would require the forms processing module, which is if you look at form alignment, if you have inserted a master form, so to speak, that quick fields will be looking at to compare to the pages, it will allow you to, as you can see here in this example, try and align the page to match. It also has form extraction, meaning it'll remove any of the lines and boilerplate that's on a form and leave you with what's basically a page that looks like it has just the basic data on there. So that's a great product, but it is an add-on. It is, I'm not sure what the price is. I'm under the impression that it's fairly pricey, but it's really pretty powerful. So if clients need that, that's a great tool. Alignment.
Quick fields agent you're talking about, Kyle?
No, forms processing.
Okay, I had something make a noise and I missed it all. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Forms processing is it's a bit pricey, but it's an add-on module within the QuickFields product itself. The QuickFields agent, as you were asking about there, Chris, it's an add-on as well, but it's kind of a standalone module. You install it separately, and it allows you to add sessions into the agent to be run on a particular schedule. And you can have multiple sessions in that QuickFields agent that can be run at all different times. Whereas you need to have forms processing purchased and installed and licensed with the session here when you add it to the session within QuickFields. All right. Some of the other processes that you see listed here on the far right side within the process list. These are pretty much where a lot of the add-on products come from. Now, because I have a VAR license kit, I get to see every single product there is, and I don't know which ones come in which packages, but you might know better than I, and if you don't, Patrick or one of the other sales reps can help you. We do have all kinds of neat things like text extraction, substitution, permanent stamps, optical mark recognition. This is in its own module or bundled with a module. Forms identification. OmniPage OCR is an add-on module. OmniPage OCR is in the basic quick fields. This allows you to basically generate text. OmniPage Zone OCR tells you, I want to pull text from a particular area on the page, and that is an add-on module. So the basic product has just a few out-of-the-box items. Most of these are add-on modules. Finally, at the bottom, size and border adjustments, border and padding, border removal and padding, those are in the basic product. Crop and resize are all in the basic product. So let's take a look at trying to process a document. Let's say we had invoices that look like we see here. Maybe we want to clean them up, maybe we don't. If we don't need to clean them up, we can skip to the classification area here, and we can do the first step, which would be to set the page identification process. And how do we do that? Well, I typically will go to the OmniPage Zone OCR, click on that, and it adds a box up here, and I can say, hey, let's go look in this area and read that area. That selection has been selected. I'm going to call this Document ID Zone, if I could type. And if this box, if I read in here, that's where I'm going to try and read to identify the page. Now, the question is, how do I know it's the beginning of a document page? Well, I need to add the There is my setting. It's not token retriever. I can add processes, and I'm going to do, I can do pattern matching, or I can actually add zone OCR here to pull the images. So this one, actually, I've set this. I can test the process. Sorry, just skipping. So I set this box here to try and read what's in that area. And it comes back in a test, and it shows me down here that my invoice word is identified. So that is set. And then what I can do is, over here on the right side, say, hey, my doc ID zone, if the doc ID zone equals or contains the word invoice, that's the beginning of my document. What's really neat is I can also set the language, and I can even set the optimization for the OCR engine. Do I need, if I know the text on the page is very nice, neat, orderly, it's not messed up, it's usually going to be nice, neat, and clean and legible, then I could even set the speed to setting on the OCR engine. But if I know that I've got a document where it's kind of messed up, it's not quite fully legible, I might set the optimization style for accuracy to try and get a better read within that zone. And finally, sometimes you have words that are turned 90 degrees on a document, and you can set that setting and say, hey, read it 90 degrees oriented or 270, whatever. And so there's going to be our identification. And then we go on to the next part, which is page processing. What are we going to look for in the document and where? So maybe we need to pull the salesperson's name. We can set that. We can add another zone. Let's call this invoice number, and we'll put it over here, get it locked in there. And notice I'm not being too specific. I'm making this box actually include 2 lines. Well, I can actually tell QuickFields to process with some advanced settings just a single line, even though it read 2 lines. I can say, hey, just take the first line. And what's funny is you're saying, okay, yeah, you've highlighted a whole box. You might even get the word invoice in amongst the invoice number. I actually can adjust for that with some special settings. So QuickFields is really powerful. We can not only set, boxes around areas, we can even tell it to ignore words and just look for numbers in this box, or look for dates in this box, or the word date. We can tell it to be very specific as to how it's behaving once we've set up this zone, as they call it. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. So once we've got our zone set up, usually I will rename those. I'll call this one, that was the salesperson zone. And that way we've got that in there. Okay, so let's assume that I've done all that. I've set up all my zones and tested them. In fact, I want to test it. I'll click the test processes, and down here I even see that it got, I think, a name. It got the value invoice space pound space 100. So it got all that information, so at least it's reading it. Is it reading the salesperson properly? Tori Nelson, but look how it read it, Tan Nelson. The R ran into the I. So my optimization for reading that zone is probably better suited to accuracy. And I might also want to set it for, as we can see here, the single line setting was true, right? So we're also reading a single line. So notice the invoice value would read just the first line, even though the box covers 2 lines. I can tell it to read both lines. So we'll go reset that, test the process, and notice, darn it, let's see, that was invoice number. We need to set that one as false as well. Okay. So we'll go ahead and clear those. We'll rerun the process. Make sure that that's all running. So the invoice field, that did that. There we go. All right. So once we've set up these zones, and I'm not going to go through everything here, but we could do some last page identification. We can even say, hey, at the very end of this processing, before you send it into Laserfiche, go ahead and do OCR. In other words, make the document text searchable so that somebody can search for text when it's in the repository. So with all that set, we could then maybe save the settings here and click on the Save the Active Session. We've got a session name. If you have Laserfiche server, you can publish the session to the Laserfiche server. On this virtual machine that I'm running here, and in this demo machine, I do not have a server that I can publish it to. But if you did have a server, you would basically get a message that says, oh, which server? Okay, great, I'll save it there. In my case, I'm going to get a message. So please forgive me on that. Just be aware that this session can be saved locally, or you can publish it to the QuickField server. And if you have a QuickField server, you can retrieve sessions from the QuickField server. So you do File, and then you can do Open from the server. All right. I'm going to close this session and go to a session that actually is already created and looks fairly familiar. So this is for an invoices process that we are pulling documents from a location, and it's going to go through and pull documents, process them, identify each one, and then theoretically it's going to do something like we see here down at the bottom. Here in this bottom left-hand corner, we see the document revision pane. And what it's done is I've set it up to pull documents from one location and store them in another. So they're going to be pulled from the incoming scans to be processed folder, but they're going to get stored in the accounting folder, the invoices subfolder under that, and then the to be processed folder under that. And what I did was something clever, was I actually had the documents get renamed as well using their invoice numbers. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's go back to what I did here. Let's go look up at pre-classification, and here's the sample document. I pulled that in, and what am I doing on that? I'm just saying, hey, I want to look for, in this area, does the page have the word invoice in it? And I'm doing that, but I'm not setting that token here. I'm actually setting it in the page identification area, token identification. So within here, I had a bunch of choices, right? And I went scooting through that list and chose the token identification process, which is, I think it's in the basic product. So usually we can do this as well. And I added that in, and I added the condition on the far right side where it says equals invoice. Then for paid processing, what am I doing? Well, I'm looking for the date and the invoice number. And then I'm doing another step, which is interesting. It's called pattern matching. And this is available in workflow as well. You might have seen this in workflow during our demonstrations or in other products. But this is a way to read a value and look for some kind of pattern, whether it's a set of digits in a certain sequence or has a certain word followed by numbers or what have you. That's basically pattern matching, and you can do this in Laserfiche using all kinds of configurations. And pattern matching, as we can see here, it allows us to do multiple sets of patterns. So maybe we'll try and identify a invoice number, maybe we'll try and get the date, and maybe even a total value. And that's the neat thing. Let's go down here. And if we look in this invoice total, this document, this invoice, as we know, invoices may shrink or grow depending on the number of items in that invoice. And that total line might be vertically changing. On one invoice, it might be up high because there's only a couple items in it. Maybe it's so long that it pushed the invoice total lower down. We can adjust for that in Quick Fields. So there's some really great tools. We can handle variations in these pages and what's occurring so that we can scan for that. So how do we do that? Well, we've got the box here. It's looking for something called total and then a number. In fact, there's the pattern matching right there. Let's look at this invoice total. So if you remember, we were looking for something at the bottom of the page somewhere that begins with the word total, and then within the parentheses here of the pattern, we're trying to grab a non-character reference or anything followed with that, and then actually, what's a \S? Let's look at that. Quantifier is large S, non-white space character. So anything in there followed, coming after the word total. So in fact, they even give you a neat tool that says here, you can even test the value. So the word total, space, and then maybe a $, it'll grab and show you what that token pattern is identifying. So now you can get some really neat things to happen. You can identify that, and then maybe even do some further pattern matching to strip out the $, or the decimals, or what have you, and that way you can get some really neat functions going on. In fact, if we look at the invoice classification here, we'll click over here, we can see there is the template called invoices. There's the number, the date, here's the total, and that's the invoice total token, and that came from the pattern matching that we're doing here. So we can do all kinds of neat things. So that gets to add that in here, and I think it's a text field, so it doesn't matter if it has the $sign in there. So when we run this, it pulls from Laserfiche, and then as it processes them, it splits them apart, and we can even see a document that it split. This one's for 15,000. It pulled the invoice number off of the document and got all the values that we needed. Really pretty clever. Now, I'm going to rerun this. Actually, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to actually run this on the session. And let's open up Quick Fields and take a look at the starting document before we run it. And that document is sitting in here under the incoming scans to be processed folder, and let's take a look. This is a sample of invoices, and this is how many documents? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're all slightly different invoice numbers, different invoice totals. They all seem to have that invoice value or the name invoice up in the top right corner. You may not get so lucky in real life, but if it is consistent, we are good to go. The real trick about using Quick Fields is, are the documents consistent? If they have a consistent pattern, we're pretty much golden. So there's our starting document. And if we go double check our session, just make sure it's set. Well, it's not exactly set like I would expect. So that was scans to be processed in Minneapolis. Let's change that. Let's make sure it's going to pull from there. Now, that's going to pull all the documents in that folder. Let's just double check. We have more than one document in here. Does this one have a template? It does not. This one does have a template, I'm pretty sure. Yep, client files. So, what do we want Quick Fields to do? Do we want Quick Fields to retrieve the documents that have no template assigned? We can do that. Or we can say pull anything, right? So it could be pull anything, I don't care if it's got one or not, or just make sure that you pull documents that do not have a template assigned. And in fact, let's make sure that this one, let's just add one. on that one so that we know that we're only going to get one document pulled in, and we should be able to identify all the pages out of that document as individual documents. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So we should get, currently we have how many documents in the list here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 in here. If we run our processing, we'll probably either end up with 12, or if I'm smart, I can change this storage location to be, let's just change it and say go to Minnesota. What the heck? And so now we'll have a separate folder. Okay, so theoretically I'd save this, and now I can hit run. This basically says go into Laserfiche, pull that document or documents, and then scan for the pages. So as you can see here, it's processing. Look how fast it's going down in the bottom left corner. Lickety split, it broke them out. Identified the areas on the page, put the values in there, and now all we have to do is store the documents into the repository altogether, or if you like to store them individually, you can say, hey, I want to store this document. So it's going to store it in there. So now we have 5 left. And let's go look in that folder. So we were going to put it in the well, if I forget, where do we store it? It's going into Accounting Invoices MN. So let's go look in Accounting Invoices, the MN folder, and there's that one I just stored. In fact, you can see the date and time stamp on there, and it's just one document, one page. So QuickFields does the identification, strips it apart, and whatnot. What you might notice also is the original, it's no longer here, but we can also send the original into another location. We can store it at, let's see, where was that? There we go. Back to any folder we want. There's the original. And so you can keep the original, or you can drop the original document. You might want to break it apart, and rather than storing double the amount, right, the original plus all the broken out documents, you can say within that session, I want to delete the documents. And in fact, we can go to that post-processing area and say move it to that location. So I actually stored it in incoming scans QuickField processed. So if we go look at incoming scans QuickField's processed, there's our source document that came back in today. Or we can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to assume that in the session everything's okay. I'm going to get all the documents broken apart, and I will be able to store them back into the repository. So you might end up adding an action that's just a delete action. Delete the original. So you have different choices. And if I'm all done, I'll store them. We're all good. All the things that I just did here manually, hitting the scan button, storing them, these can all be done for us using the QuickFields Agent module, which is that add-on product. But it is pricey. So it usually makes sense when you have multiple sessions and lots of documents to be processed, and you're going to be doing that at night, and they are very consistent, easily read, and identified documents. If you're dealing with documents that are handwritten, well, forget about it for one thing. But if they're carbon copies or scans of a second carbon, you know what? It's going to require some testing to make sure that automation can be done. Many times those lend themselves to a more manual process. But if you have documents that are nice and clean, like we have in this case here, well then great. You could probably automate them for the most part. But that is how you build a session and process documents and store them in manually. Obviously, we can automate that. And then this document class or its configuration, this session, can be stored either on a local system or on a server, like you saw. You can do File and do Save or Publish. You can also retrieve from local or from a server. If you have the document classification module, which is an add-on to the QuickField's main license, you can add additional document classes to be processed in the same session. So you could say, I want to process invoices, I want to process statements, I want to process whatever it may be. And you could add 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20 different document types, each with its own very specific look and feel of document and identification properties, and add them into one session. Now, that's by using the document classification add-on. Without it, you have to build one session in with one classification, and then the next classification has to be its own session. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So with that said, it's really a phenomenal product. We as consultants in the consulting department will usually work with the client to set these up, as is usually the case, and then they pretty much learn how to do it from there. And if they need training, obviously we do training initially, and then additional training if they need it, whatever their service package allows. And usually they get this. Trust me, QuickFields is probably easier to learn than Workflow because there's not as many things to do. But there's some really neat tricks, as I defined in here, when you're dealing with zones and image pages, and maybe you need to do special things. We can handle what we're doing here with the invoice total. That's a variable space. What are we doing in the advanced options? Are we looking for a single line? Yes. But we're looking for a value when we went to the token itself. We're doing a pattern match that says, hey, find the value that comes after the word total. So we know that's what's coming in there. We can do that for all kinds of things. So I have not even scratched the surface of all the capabilities, but needless to say, as you can see within the page processing, all these processes are available to us. Can we read barcodes? Absolutely. Barcode cover pages is a very common way of doing backscanning projects where we know we wanted to say, okay, this is the start of a whole new packet, and I don't care what the barcode name is, or maybe the barcode actually has some information in it. We can read that barcode and use it as the identifier, as well as the values to put into a token or a name. We can do, as we saw, generate OCR text. We can do reading of zones. This is one of the most common things. Pattern matching. We can add permanent stamps. We can stamp documents and apply other kinds of annotations. Do you want to do redaction, in automated redaction? Yes, you can. Is an add-on module? Yes. It's part of the high-end add-on module, but needless to say, you can do that. Is it the best at doing automatic redactions? Is QuickFields the best? That's up to the client to decide. I would tend to have to take a look at the situation. What kind of documents are we looking at? How consistent are they? Can we get a standard read on these documents so that we can identify a place to redact? Well, then maybe QuickFields is your choice. Sometimes it's not the choice. It just really depends. And that would be a process that you would go through with in your sales process. And I would recommend salespeople bringing us consultants in, and if we don't already have a pre-sales engineer, bring us in to discuss what that scenario is going to be so that we can see if that's going to be the best solution. We would hope that it is, but sometimes there are cases where just the sheer volume of documents that are going to be scanned is going to take QuickFields too long to do. So it depends.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to stop here. Any questions on anything we covered in QuickFields? Because that's an introduction, and anything else. The scanning module and the server modules, I really can't show you because my virtual machine doesn't have it, but go and look at the documentation, and it does give an example of what it looks like. And there's 3 different users.
Yeah, that VAR site probably has a bunch. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the VAR site does too. So any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Nope, not for me.
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to conclude the session right now and let you have a great day, and